Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Providence, where we love beyond belief. My name is Cynthia Rosengard, and I will be your worship associate today. A special welcome to those of us who are joining us for the first time and those who are joining us remotely. We're so pleased that everyone can be here and hope that you will return again soon. During the summer, while our minister is away, the worship committee hosts a series of services which are led by church members or friends, with music also provided by church members and friends. This morning, we are so pleased to have Alicia Living as our speaker. Raised as an American Muslim in the U.S., Alicia lived, taught, and raised her children for almost a decade in the Middle East before returning to the U.S. She discovered Unitarian Universalism as a way of living true to her values and as her whole self. This morning, she generously shares how accepting all parts of our unique identities can help us reclaim our power to heal and to grow. Alicia is an upcoming author, a survivor, and an advocate for survivor-led abuse prevention and awareness. She is the Director of Communications at the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Alicia enjoys writing and is raising two amazing children with her husband in West Warwick. We also extend our thanks to our musicians this morning, Brian Bartling, as well as Linda Gully, accompanying him. After the prelude, Alicia will be calling the traditional Muslim call to prayer from our pulpit. Let us now center our hearts and minds as we begin our worship together.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Everyone, please join me in the words of our chalice lighting that are printed in your order of service. This light burns also in our hearts, and it lights our path. Now is the time when we get up and greet those in our pew neighborhood and those we know in other pew neighborhoods. So please rise as you're able and say hello to those who are near and far. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Now is the time in our service when we read our church covenant together. Again, it's printed in the order of service. We, the members of the First Unitarian Church of Providence, with respect for the worth and dignity of each person, with wonder at the light we know by many names, and with gratitude for our deep connection to each other and to the larger web of existence, covenant to walk together in our search for truth, seeking the paths of wisdom, compassion, and justice. Our reading today comes from the beginning of the Quran. In the name of God, the most compassionate, most merciful, all praise is for God, Lord of all worlds, the most compassionate, most merciful, owner of the day of judgment. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Guide us along the straight path, the path of those you have blessed, not those you are displeased with or those who are astray.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
We now hear the joys and sorrows of the people in our congregation as written in the book at the back of the meeting house. Our partner church in Transylvania carved the beautiful candlestick pedestal for the large candle from which we light all our individual candles of joy and sorrow. Today we have one, prayers for my sweet cat Tiramisu, who is very ill and needs an ultrasound and possibly surgery for a bowel obstruction. On the upside, I'm glad to have my mother, Wanana Dobbs, visiting for the weekend. Friends, let us rest in gladness that we have each other to share in our joys and sorrows. It makes all the difference. As Mary Oliver says, to live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it, and when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go. Our meditation today is a prayer that Alicia suggested to me from Rumi. I prayed for change, so I changed my mind. I prayed for guidance and learned to trust myself. I prayed for happiness and realized I am not my ego. I prayed for peace and learned to accept others unconditionally. I prayed for abundance and realized my doubt kept it out. I prayed for wealth and realized it is my health. I prayed for a miracle and realized I am a miracle. I prayed for a soulmate and realized I am the one. I prayed for love and realized it's always knocking, but I have to allow it in. During the time of silence, if you've lost someone close to you in the past year, we invite you to stand or raise your hand in silent witness of that loss.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to bring the sounds of Islam into this church this morning with the call to prayer earlier. I would like to invite everyone to look up to the dome above us. It reminds me of the beautiful domes in mosques across the Middle East and is a reminder that we are more alike than different. I wanted to preface today by saying that I use the words God and Allah interchangeably when I speak. Allah means God in Arabic and is used by Arab Christians in the Middle East in their churches. It is not another deity. My name is Alicia Living, and I'm married to a wonderful man named Joe. I am a mother of 2 amazing teens and a Muslim and a Unitarian Universalist. I am a writer and an artist. I am also the Director of Communications at the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. My role in communications there is to write, speak, and help others to use their voices. I, too, am a survivor of child abuse and domestic violence. I share some mentions of violence today, so please feel free to step away or to care for yourself if you need to. I was born in a small town in Kansas to a hardworking single mother who raised me to know faith. My first memory is sitting in a church, much like this one. I was sitting beside my mother, and I saw an envelope in the back pew in front of us. "What is this for?" I asked. My mother replied without missing a beat, "To write a letter to God." I took a pen and excitedly wrote my first words, asking God if I could see him. Then I slipped the letter into God's mailbox, which was really the donation box, and waited to hear back. I never received a letter back from God, but I've learned more about God as I have learned more about myself. It is stated in Islamic tradition by Imam Ghazali, "Whosoever knows himself knows his Lord." Not long after this first memory, my mother met my stepfather, who had moved to Kansas from Beirut, Lebanon, fleeing the war. He was Muslim. A few months after they met, they were married. My new father taught me to call him Baba, which means dad in Arabic. Baba moved us to Colorado, where I would spend the rest of my childhood. When I was 5, my mother and I converted to Islam. My mother taught me that Christianity and Islam were not very different. She told me that Muslims believed in the same God who spoke to the Jewish nation and then to the Christians, and that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, came as the final messenger. Muslims believe that Jesus was simply a prophet. In Islam, there is no Trinity. There is only one God, Allah. As I grew up, I became confused about my identity. At Arabic school, I looked different from my Muslim friends. At public school, even though I looked like the other American children, my home life was very different. We prayed and fasted. We didn't eat pork or have alcohol in our fridge. We read the Quran often. I had read the entire Quran several times by the time I was a teenager. Even as my faith grew, my Baba seemed angry at small things, things I could not predict. He struggled with his own identity as an immigrant to America, facing prejudice and racism. He worked hard to provide. He was raised to believe that to keep your children in line and make them good people, you needed to discipline them, and sometimes harshly. When I was hit at home by my stepdad, I blamed myself, and I carried a sense of shame. I was taught never to tell anyone what happened inside our house, so I remained silent. To avoid being home, I spent many hours rollerblading outdoors, and if I was home, I would hide in my room, writing in my journal, and of course, praying to Allah. My mother had taught me the 99 names of Allah because she was trying to memorize all 99. It is said that if you memorize them all by heart, you will enter heaven. Muslims use the 99 names of Allah to call to God when they are in need or in remembrance. Allah is the 100th name, but Allah has 99 other names that teach us about his characteristics and who he is. They can help us to understand the identity of God. I still remember my mother saying them. Ar-Rahman, the merciful, Ar-Rahim, the beneficent, Al-Malik, the king, Al-Qudus, the most sacred, As-Salam, the source of peace. These names help me to understand Allah and to better understand myself. One verse in the Quran shares some of Allah's names. He is the first and the last, the manifest and the hidden, and he is the knower of all things. When I prayed to Allah, I was hidden from people, but my prayers made me feel manifest before Allah. I didn't feel alone or afraid anymore. He alone could know what was in my heart. Praying to Allah gave me a sense of security and protection. As a teenager, I vacillated between my American identity and my identity as a Muslim. I decided I was an American Muslim. It was comforting to have a clear set of rules to follow that were right or wrong, halal or haram. Islam had a way of life that felt like it could protect me from harm if I followed all the rules. Baba taught me that Muslim girls were not allowed to move out of the house unless they married. I wanted to leave because of the hitting and yelling, but I didn't want to lose my family. So I decided to fully step into my role as a Muslim woman and get married. As in Islam, marriage is considered fulfilling half of our religion. Baba bought me plane tickets and sent me to Lebanon when I was 18. I stayed with my grandma for the summer, and that's where I met Usama. Usama's parents encouraged us to spend a lot of time together and to get married. I fell in love, and I felt comforted that my future husband was a Muslim who could understand my way of life because he was raised the same way that I was. When I returned to America, I started wearing the Islamic headscarf or hijab, which meant I would only show my face and my hands outside of my home and around men that were not related to me. It was my choice. I was a good Muslim, and no one would see my body or hurt me again. The abuse had taken away my power, and hijab gave me a way to take back control over my body. Usama flew over from Lebanon to my parents' home in Colorado that spring with his father, his first time in America. Our fathers negotiated our marriage, whether and where I would go to college, and who would pay for college. Would I work? Could we get married before Usama found work? When would we have kids? The fathers would decide. Usama's father decided, and Usama listened to him, and I listened to Usama. I was to be a good daughter, and then a good wife. 2 weeks after Usama and I married, the Twin Towers were attacked. As Muslims, we faced a lot of hatred. Usama started going by Sam. While walking to college one day, I was called names and told to go back to my country. Usama wanted me to remove my hijab because he was afraid I would be attacked. But obeying Allah was a part of who I was. Allah protected me. I also wanted Usama to be happy, so I wore a hat and a scarf to cover my neck, so that both Allah and my husband would be happy. I was good at making everyone happy. As things settled down, I felt safe enough to wear hijab again with the encouragement of some of my classmates at college. Just when I felt safer, I started feeling uneasy at home. I felt criticized and put down by Usama. He never thanked me for the meal I cooked every night, and one day he screamed at me for leaving a pot I had left soaking in the sink. I wasn't allowed to leave a single dish unclean. I became afraid of upsetting him, and I tried harder to be a better wife. After I graduated college, I had my first child. I was afraid of how people would treat them. My husband wanted to move to the Middle East, where he said he could provide a better quality of life. I felt it was my duty as his wife to support him and to protect my child from the prejudice they would experience as a Muslim Arab American. In the Middle East, I felt safer as a Muslim woman. There was no fear that someone would yell at me to go back to my country or call me towel head or tell me how well I spoke English. I could pray and fast and wear hijab, all normal things that were praised, not shunned. I thought that once I moved to the Middle East, Usama would show that he loved me for moving across the world with him. But he only became more critical of me. I spent all day isolated in an apartment on the 15th floor in Dubai. I had a 9-month-old baby and didn't know anyone. Usama worked late into the evening, and when he came home, he wouldn't speak to me. My whole identity was cleaning, caring for my daughter, and cooking for Usama. I didn't have a bank account or my own documents. I didn't pay bills or get mail. I saved $20 a week from the grocery shopping money that Usama gave me, and when he found out, he forbade me from grocery shopping. 8 years passed. We lived in Kuwait with 2 children, ages 5 and 8. I had worked 3 years to open my own business, a community learning center where parents came with their children ages 0 to 7, and there I taught parents how to spend time with their children through art and play, how to be present and loving, and how to guide without discipline. Finally, I had a place in the world where I had felt seen and appreciated, but when I returned home, I felt like a ghost. One night, while I was washing the dishes, Usama hit our eldest child, Rania, for mixing up one of her letters on their Arabic homework. I watched as a single teardrop ran down their face. I stood silent, witnessing the same abusive behavior that had been done to me, and I couldn't stop it. I ran to the bedroom crying. Something had to change. I knew I had to break the cycle. My identity could no longer be tied to doing what my husband wanted or what he said was best. I had to think for myself. Allah, as I knew him, was the protector. He was also the just. And I also had to be the protector and protect my daughters. I couldn't change overnight, so I began exploring to find my identity. I started doing the things I did when I was a child. I kept a secret journal. Writing as I had when I was young helped me to reconnect with myself spiritually. I drew swirling murals on the dining room wall. I couldn't move the walls that were enclosed around me, but I could change them into something beautiful. I began to find my power. I gave my kids markers to draw on the walls too. I bought rollerblades and went rollerblading again with my hijab blowing in the wind behind me. Women in that area did not draw attention to themselves in public or rollerblade. But I did this and I survived. I was myself and I was still safe. After that day of skating in public, I felt something else about my identity needed to change, my hijab. I had worn it for Allah, but I also wore it to cover my body so I wouldn't be hurt. But when I saw myself in the mirror without it, I liked my long, wild hair. It felt like who I was. But I was afraid to be without my hijab. It would be my 5-year-old daughter, Maya, who would inspire me to finally overcome my fear. At Maya's parent-teacher conference, her teacher told me that Maya had never spoken a word at school and that she had never once heard Maya's voice. When I asked Maya about it that night, she explained to me that her voice was only for home, just like my hair was only for the home. I didn't share it with anyone. I covered it up in public. Maya's voice spoke to me. I wasn't living, I was surviving. I was protecting myself through obedience, and if I continued that path, my children would end up like me and never be free. And I was afraid they would never be seen or heard either. I had to change. I removed my hijab. I wanted to be protected, and that was the sole focus of my life, but I wasn't really living. Religion can be a place for some who have trauma to feel safe. My love for my children had to be my new identity. Unconditional love is about allowing and accepting all of our identities, just as I had with Allah. The opposite of that is constricting identity, forcing conformity, placing judgment, and that is where abuse lies. Abuse is not only about wielding power and control, it is about erasing identity. Finally, I decided I have to leave Usama. I asked him for a divorce. I know now from my line of work that this is the most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive relationship, is when she tries to leave. It was the first time I spoke up for myself. It was the first time that he was physically violent, but it wouldn't be the last. Allah was my dearest beloved and with me through all of that pain. I spoke to Allah and I knew He was with me. Then Usama grew angrier. He yelled that if I left the house without his permission, he would call the Kuwaiti police and have me brought back home because I was his wife and I had to do what he wanted. Then Usama threatened that if I tried to leave, he would take our children to Lebanon, where they would be raised by his parents and I would never see them again. I wondered how my children and I would ever be free. With the help of Allah, one night, while Usama was out, I searched and found our passports. That night was the last night and the last time I would be under my husband's control. I needed Usama to feel at ease and trust me so I could slip away with my 2 children and be free. I washed up for the prayer, laid out my prayer rug, and asked my husband if he wanted to pray with me. He laid his rug in front of me and led the prayer, Allahu Akbar. We both raised our hands besides our ears, Allahu Akbar. There is a saying in Islam, beware of the prayer of the oppressed, since there is no veil between them and Allah. Usama read in a low tone. I prayed again from a silent place, where I prayed as a child. I needed Allah. Ya Allah, help me, protect me and my children. I am afraid. I am alone. I only have you alone to hear my calls. Ya Allah, hear my calls. As-Salam, the source of peace. Al-Muhaymin, the preserver of safety, the protector. Al-Khabir, the all-aware. I didn't know if Allah accepted my prayer. I lived in that moment, in the true mystery that only Allah knew my future. My only duty was to take that step and do what I knew in my heart I had to do. I had to be me. I had to give my children the chance to be themselves. After the prayer, there was a long silence between us. I thanked him and waited for him to go to bed. I laid awake beside him for almost 2 hours until I heard him snoring. Silently, I got up and hid the passports in the oven. He had never opened the stove because I was the cook. Allah could keep my secret safe in this identity. Then I hid in the bathroom and called my mother, finally asking for her help after all those years. I told her I found our passports and I needed help finding a flight out of Kuwait and back to the US. I had to get out the next day before he noticed the passports missing. After my mom purchased the tickets, I stayed up all night planning our escape. In the morning, I made breakfast and packed the kids' lunch bags. I had to make our routine appear the same so Usama wouldn't suspect anything. When the kids left for school with Usama, I printed out the plane tickets, packed a few small bags, and took some of the money I'd earned but had obediently given to my husband. I forged a letter allowing me permission to leave with my children because by Kuwait law, I couldn't fly my kids out of Kuwait without Usama's consent. With the help of a friend, I picked up my children from school, faking that I needed to take them to doctor's appointments. I put my hijab back on to match my passport photo. I had the kids quickly change out of their school uniforms in the back seat of the car as I drove to the airport. We were to fly out that afternoon, just hours before Usama would come home from work. I was terrified. When I got to the airport, I knew I would have to have my fingerprint scanned to travel out of the country as a foreigner. And I believed my husband had barred me from leaving the country by placing a travel ban on me. By some miracle, when the gentleman at the airport asked me a question, he was so disarmed when I responded to him in Arabic and introduced my 2 children to him, Rania and Maya, that he forgot to ask for my fingerprint and he let me pass. We had 2 more flights with a 12-hour layover in Turkey. During the layover, Usama alerted the police. They found footage of us escaping at the airport. So by the time we landed in Amsterdam, before our final flight to America, I had been reported missing. The security guard at the airport confiscated our passports and questioned me. Why did you book this trip the night before? Why don't you have any luggage? Why don't you have return tickets? And where is your husband? I showed him the forged letter giving me permission to travel to the US. I held my breath. If he alerted the international police or held us and sent us back to Kuwait, I was facing imprisonment, beatings, and most terrifying of all, the loss of my children. While all the other passengers were boarding the flight that would leave in minutes, we were still being held. The guard looked me in the eyes when I told him I needed to talk to him. I thought if I could just explain what would happen if he didn't let me get on that plane, he would understand. Instead, he read everything I needed to say in my eyes. Then he said, "Wait here." He returned with our passports and said, "Go." I grasped the 3 passports in my hand, knowing the gate for boarding was about to close, and he said, "Get on the plane." I reached for my children's hands, and we boarded the plane. I was shaking as we found our seats, and I could hardly believe we were about to be free. I knew life would be hard in the US. I would have to start over and rebuild my life without knowing how to do many things I had been kept from doing, things as simple as having a mailbox and receiving mail. The day we landed back in America, I promised myself I would never let go of my freedom and that I would raise my daughters to know the importance of living a life that's free. Their choice. No one would tell them who to marry, where to live, whether they could work or not, where they could go. I may have rescued my children, but it was they who rescued me. They gave me the ability to love so fiercely that I could find the courage to start a new life. I returned safely to America 8 years ago, and I've worked hard to find who I am. I do not blame a culture or a religion for my abuse. I believe people have the free will to choose to harm others or not. Allah was the patient, as-sabur, the guide, al-hadi, the illuminator, an-nur. Allah is thee. He holds the perfection of all identities, and we are not meant to be perfect. I didn't need to be the perfect daughter or the perfect wife. I needed to be me. Many people are not free to be themselves. People are hated for their dress or for their faith, and my heart is with the LGBTQ+ community. Many are forced to hold identities that are not theirs in order to be safe. Women in this country are forced physically with their bodies to do things they do not agree with, and sometimes by law. And nearly 1 in 3 women in Rhode Island report having experienced domestic violence. Abuse knows no religion, background, education, or financial security. It happens across all socioeconomic levels. It doesn't discriminate. It is here and it is overseas. Gender-based violence is everywhere, and I'm here to speak up against it. In my search for truth, no religion or faith would condone abuse. In my new identity, I hold many identities. Not 99, but I believe we all hold pieces and parts of shared and individual identities. I needed a place where I could feel community and safety. That was not the mosque I grew up in or the church that preached to turn those away who do not do what they do. I found Unitarian Universalism accepted people from all backgrounds. It was a place for love. I was drawn in by this first principle of UU, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I needed my children and I to feel worthy. But it was the fourth principle that really spoke to me, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Reverend Paige Getty of the UU Congregation of Maryland shares this. As responsible religious seekers, we recognize that we are privileged to be free, to have resources to pursue life beyond mere survival, to continually search for truth and meaning, to exist beyond bonds of dogma and oppression, and to wrestle freely with truth and meaning as they evolve. It is part of who I am to continue my search for truth and meaning so I can continue to grow. I lost my voice and became hidden, and now I speak up for myself and for other women and children. I came full circle. My first memory was writing a letter to God asking to see him, and now I write for a living. And through that, I see God every day. Writing is sacred. Our words have the power to open hearts and minds. I wrote my own memoir called Hidden Calling about my story. I write for the silent because I know they will be heard through the words on the page. Hold your identity close. Learn who you are each day. You will learn more about yourself by what you choose. And whatever you do, be accepting and curious of yourself and others. The pain, the hurt, the difficulties, and the triumphs will shape who you are. Don't regret or hold shame for old identities you once held. You held them because they served you in some way at the time. Holding your identities with respect and love for all of who you are will be what frees you. Being human is holding multiple identities. We all hold parts of ourselves that we may view as positive or negative, but there is value in both. To those parts, the ones that seem to clash, love them, see them, hear them. And don't hold your beliefs too tightly. Hold them loosely so you can let them go when need be. There is something special in not knowing all of our identities yet. Be open to the mystery unfolding, open to a new truth unveiling itself. That which works today may not tomorrow. That which is meaningful now may mean something different in the future. As Unitarian Universalists, we strive to be seekers. I went from needing protection to being a protector of my children, of myself, and other women, something I never imagined. And that is the magic of life and the magic of spirituality, not the surety in who we are and stagnant, rigid truths, but the flow, the burn, the light of the unknowing. I unveiled my identity in that light. I am a seeker, a dreamer, a believer. Though I know God by many names, I leave the all-knowing for Allah, for I want to be part of the mystery. If He wanted me to know everything, I wouldn't need the experience of living. I am Alicia living.
Please rise as you're able and share in singing hymn number 23, Bring Many Names. We have been warmed by fires we did not build. We have drunk at wells we did not dig. And we have gathered in fellowship in this space that is far older than any of us assembled. But it is this space that we create and recreate anew that bonds us to each other. We pass our collection baskets to make a community expression of thanks for our many blessings, those who have witnessed and those yet to come. The morning offering for the work of the congregation will now be generously given and gratefully received. As always, thank you for all that you give, all that you do, and all that you are. Our services next Sunday will be led by Lynn Corbell, who will be speaking about the thread that you follow, the heart's pull. We look forward to seeing you then. Be sure to check the First Few Times, our weekly newsletter that is the single source for news, events, and everything that's happening at First Unitarian. The First Few Times is sent by email to all members, friends, and others who sign up to receive it. You can access it and sign up through our church website or fill out a guest registry form at the welcome table in the meeting house. Now please join me in the closing words and our chalice extinguishing that are printed in your order of service. We carry the flame of peace and love and hope until we meet again.